Zen tradition has really done a marvelous job with not only mapping the territory of awakening, which I detail in my book, Demystifying Awakening, but really coming up with the koan practices as a way to facilitate awakening, to deepen, to move us outside our normal conceptual orientation into direct experience, direct knowing, what I call pure awareness, is non-conceptual knowing. So I'm going to read one more of the stanzas. This is the second stanza from Trust and Awakening. Any distinction, the distance between heaven and earth. Awakening Nibbana acquits for and against. So again, this poem is just so marvelous to me. It contains so much. There's so many nuggets we can work with. Any distinction. So any way that we are separating, we are making a duality, a me and you, a me and this object, this glass, this microphone. So there's a separation, a duality that's part of what reaffirms the sense of self, is through distinction. The second line, the distance between heaven and earth. So this is really pointing to, if we make any separation, it's the distance between heaven and earth, which is the most enormous distance that can be established. So this is where we're trying not to divide. We're trying to orient towards the unity, the undivided, the non-dual functioning of the Absolute. The third line, awakening Nibbana. In the Theravadan tradition, Nibbana is the experience where one advances on the map of awakening, the 4 stages of Theravada Buddhism. And in the traditional Theravadan, as I learned it from my teacher in Myanmar, was that Nibbana requires us to have an experience, or let me phrase it differently, the experience of cessation is critical and required to advance on the map of awakening in the Theravadan tradition. I will say that I do know of 1 or 2 Western Theravadan teachers who accept a Zen awakening, a Kensho experience, as the first stage of the Theravadan path, which is stream entry. So when I say Nibbana here, I'm really giving a kind of code. I'm saying, yes, Nibbana is complete awakening, but it's the experience of cessation, which is the ceasing of all mentality and materiality. So any way you can possibly know yourself is gone. There's nothing remaining. And in fact, awareness and consciousness also cease for the period of time that cessation is present. Cessation is most characterized like a dreamless sleep. So a blackness, deeply peaceful, deeply still. And when awareness comes back online and consciousness come back online after an experience of cessation, there's a profound sense that something really significant has happened. So we can tell something big happened. In my observation of students, the experience of cessation needs to be at least 30 minutes for there to be a big enough shift to where we could call it stream entry. And they'd have to be exhibiting a knowing about the changing of that behavior. So overall, I have 3 components that make up a Kensho, an awakening. And that is a deep experience in what I call absence of self. Traditionally, we would call this no self in Buddhism in the Zen tradition. But it functions where if we're self-referencing, we normally turn in and we find a variety of things, our opinions, our thought process, our emotions, all these different ways that we recognize me as being different from you. So this is one of the experiences when we have absence of self and we self-reference. There's nothing. There's no assertion of a self. The components we can't quite locate. So it's a sense of absence, of a missing sense of self. But it's more than that. The absence is really both, we could call it empty, which is the traditional term in Buddhism, but it also has a fullness that's indescribable because it's non-conceptual. So when I say awakening Nibbana, it's really, I'm using the same term, that waking up has these three components. We're talking about absence of self. The second is seeing clearly that our true nature, the absolute in our consciousness, is our true identity. So it's not just seeing the absence of self, it's recognizing that as fundamentally who I am. And then the third component is a deep unity experience, a oneness, a love experience. Everything is love, including me. So you can see we have a whole lot going on here in this awakening Nibbana framing. And the final line, acquits for and against. So again, we're letting go, releasing our likes and dislike in a way that we have these pronouncements that I'm equating to a criminal trial, like acquit or be found guilty. But it acquits for and against. So it releases it in a way that's very thorough. When we talk about the depth of an awakening, that really is a question of how long the awakening lasts, how long the absence of self remains predominant. At some point, the normal personality will begin to be activated and functioning after an awakening. But it comes back for most people fairly slowly. It doesn't just return like the unwanted house guest. It shows up a little at a time. And many people will try to hold the awakening, try to keep the awakening experience, remembering how it felt, different qualities. But once we try to recreate an experience, we're moving it into a conceptual territory. So it's no longer a direct, non-conceptual experience. We're now conceptualizing it, and the sense of self is getting engaged in trying to maintain that. So, and the one secret I will tell is that no awakening is ever duplicated. So if there's an awakening, say, deeply into the absolute, it's not going to happen in the very same way again. It's going to be different because other aspects of your consciousness need to be opened and realized and expressed in the absolute. So later today, I'll talk about the 3 stages of the Zen awakening map. So one of the questions I get fairly routinely is, well, how come everybody isn't awake? If there's this simple components of absence of self, seeing true nature as our true identity, and the oneness of love, why wouldn't we all just be having this experience all the time? It sounds wonderful. And in fact, it is wonderful. It's really a life-affirming change we can experience. But it's because we're so committed to our sense of self, and we've hardwired it to connect to our survival instinct. So that means that when we feel a sense of loss of self or absence of self, it can trigger our survival instinct. Because in our experience, the personality looks at anything that takes it away as a form of death or some type of extinguishment. So there's a lot invested in maintaining the sense of self. We think that's what's keeping us alive, it's what's keeping us functioning, that's what's keeping us in relationship in the world. Without that, we think we won't be able to engage with others, have meaningful relationships, or conduct ourselves in a normal way. And that's actually quite false. We can actually function better because we're not working through the different layers and lenses of the personality as they're liberated. They're dropped.